Palmore, and I am live with Valerie George, our Vice President of Research and Development. And this is the Here and Now Live, the Chemist and the Colorist. Val is our brilliant chemist behind all of our wonderful products and, more importantly, our color brands. And I am the manager of professional hair color for sales, training, and development, and a hair veteran of 23 years behind the chair. Val, what do we have for them today?
Well, I'm super excited to talk about the episode that just aired, episode 3, where we talked about bonds in the hair. That was really fun for me to film because I, of course, love talking about hair and how products impact the hair and how it impacts my choices as a formulator. And then I think we have a lot of questions that people emailed in, right?
We do, and I too love this episode. I think as a hairdresser, we need to understand the why more importantly. And within this episode 3, we discussed the bonds of the hair. The bonds of the hair are so integral in everything that we do, especially when working with chemical services. It really gives the why and understanding as to why the hair is behaving the way it is, why color is taking or not taking for that matter. How can we help fix it and get it on a good path if that's something that's necessary? And also just being able to really customize a formula and make better choices when choosing either permanent or semi-permanent, our lightener, our developer choices. So really understanding the bonds of the hair is going to impact every single thing that we do. Even as far as when we style the hair, shampoo, it really is going to dictate everything that we do. So let's recap the episode a little bit. Val, does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we have our 3 bonds. I know everyone's loving hearing your bond song. So if you haven't checked it out.
On air, that was something they captured, yeah.
It was off the cuff. One thing you have to know about Val, as brilliant as she is, she has the best sense of humor. So we always have lots of fun when we are filming. You'll see that in this episode. But as far as the bonds go, why don't you break them down for us?
Yeah, so there are 3 main types of bonds in the hair. We have covalent bonds, which most people know as disulfide bonds. That's the strongest bond in the hair. 2 sulfur groups linked together, holding the keratin fiber together. We also have electrostatic bonds, which are also called salt bridges in my world, in the science of keratin. And then we have hydrogen bonds. And the latter 2 are the most prevalent in hair. And I would say are responsible for most of the hair's structure and function. You know, when we're straightening the hair, we're not messing up disulfide bonds, we're messing up those hydrogen and electrostatic bonds. And then the disulfide bonds are really the ladder of the hair. They're the meat, the integrity, making the structure of the hair fiber and determining predominantly its shape.
I think one thing with disulfide bonds, there's so much mystery around what they actually do and how they're affected, but knowing that disulfide bonds are truly affected by a chemical service, and because we color hair so much, when we are breaking those different bonds down, now with disulfide bonds, are they able to reconnect and rejoin, or are they, once they're broken, they're broken?
No, once they're broken, they're broken. When we do permanent waving on hair, or perming, as most people call it, we can make these, you've learned about them in beauty school, the lanthione bonds that are kind of like trying to connect them back together, but there's no real way to get them formed back together as they were. It's kind of like, sorry, the damage is done.
I always learned when I was doing perms that it was the neutralizer that was really impacting that new wave pattern. Is that true?
Yeah, that's what's creating those bridges back together. They're not the same disulfide bonds, but they're these artificial bridges back in the hair. And that's what the neutralizer is doing.
Oh, interesting. I wish I had you around when I was going through my perming phase.
I wish you were around when I went through my perming phase. I never got to perm my hair. My mom told me no. And I remember everybody in 4th grade had one, including Chelsea, this girl in my class, and I never got one. So I'm still a little traumatized that I've never got, but I used to have curly hair as a kid. So
you have virgin hair. Maybe we can do a quick wrap one of these days. As far as color goes, I know we hear so many things about just breaking the hair down in different ways. And with disulfide bonds really being the focus of our coloring services, does it really vary between permanent hair color and lightener, or is it really the hair doesn't know any different? It's just that chemical reaction that's happening within the hair.
Well, the bonds are being broken the same, meaning, you have this oxidative environment, these bonds are being broken. That is the same. I think the magnitude in which it happens, I would probably say Lightener is even more aggressive for a couple reasons. One, you have the persulfates in the hair, and persulfates are just generally more aggressive chemistry wise. They really love that disulfide bond. And then two, when you are doing lightening, you tend to use more hydrogen peroxide to get the hair as light as possible. And I think adding that extra hydrogen peroxide also does more damage than a conventional permanent hair color. So while they're both damaging bonds, breaking disulfide bonds, and denaturing the protein in the hair, I would say Lightener is probably a little worse at it.
Okay. I know that we just recently filmed some more episodes. So this particular one about bond builders will be coming in the future. So I'm looking forward to everybody seeing this episode first and then being able to see that one following soon to kind of give even that deeper dive. I know that we get questions all the time about bond builders and how they work, but this kind of gives a little bit of that insider trading on what's happening inside the hair.
Yeah, this episode really was like, what are bonds and how are they disrupted in the services that we do? And the bond builder conversation that we have is the opposite, right? Okay, the bonds are broken, now what? So it's interesting to think about, because the real question is, does it go back to how it was before?
I'd like to dive a little deeper into, I call them salt bonds and you call them
Electrostatic or salt bridges, yeah.
Okay. So salt that's broken down through changes in the pH. Is that accurate? Where it's altering?
pH can impact those types of bonds. It can also impact hydrogen bonds as well.
Okay. And then the hydrogen, that's through changes in water, heat, like when we style the hair.
So both of them sort of have the same reactions or things that disturb them. And they're both very similar in that sense. When you get hair wet, you're changing the electrostatic bonds, you're changing the hydrogen bonds, because they aren't able to interact in the same ways due to the presence of the water molecules in the hair.
I know one question I get a lot from my clients when they're due for a haircut, heat styling is so popular now with waving the hair. I noticed that when they come back and they're due for a haircut, the waving may not take as well as it once did, where it sort of droops at the ends. And once they get a haircut, it starts to react better to their heat styling and they're much happier. So is it safe to say that when you break those bonds down so much, they are not really going to accept a style as easily?
I would say there's probably a few things going on. Either you can have such detrimental waving damage to the hair that you've denatured the protein in a way that you're not going to get the shift like you did before. I also think, the longer hair gets, the more weight you have, and just the physics of the hair fiber can alter the style. And two, I think the way in which your hair accepts product as well, and can accept humidity from the ambient atmosphere when it has that damage, can make an impact in styling as well. So important.
That's great to know. Yeah, that's great to know for everybody out there, especially if you're trying to educate your clients or guests on what to do with products, how to kind of recommend their timing in between their haircuts or colors and whatnot. So thanks, Val. So for those of you who are just tuning in, it is the Hair and Now live with Valerie George and myself, Jen Montoya Palmore, and we are discussing episode 3, and we just got into the bonds of the hair. And we always love through social media to reach out through Palm Mitchell Pro, our own social media pages, to get questions from our viewers. And we do have a handful that we'd love to review on today's live. So we want to get started. All right, so we have some, I think, a nice variety of questions today. First up is a great question that I know we both get this a lot, as far as color safe shampoo and sulfate free. So the sulfate free equate to color safe because the idea behind some of this question here is that if the product is deemed color safe and it has sulfates, is it still going to be actually color safe?
Yeah, so the color sulfate-free color safe movement really started in the early 2000s when the Markham family created Pureology. Before that, sulfate-free hadn't really been a conversation. And sulfates are perceived to be more gentle surfactants than sulfates like sodium lauryl sulfate or sodium lauryl sulfate in shampoos. And so the notion is if you're using these gentler surfactants, you won't have as much color loss on the hair. Well, in some instances, that's true. In other instances, it's not. I can show you several sulfate-free shampoos that we've formulated in the lab and not gone to market with because they actually strip color out of the hair worse than a clarifying shampoo. So just looking for sulfate-free isn't automatically an indicator of whether it's color safe or not. It's not an indicator about whether it's more gentle or not. What you need to look for is actually the term color safe. And that's because when brands are putting color safe on a label or somewhere else, they've actually validated through claims testing, or they should have validated through claims testing that the product is more gentle than, a clarifying shampoo, more gentle than water. Water by itself is probably the biggest culprit of removing hair color from hair. So that's why when people say, hey, what are tips to make my color last longer? I'm like, don't get it wet. Just because water really does remove hair color. So yeah, don't judge a sulfate, by the bottle. Really look for that color safe seal, and that will tell you whether or not it's color safe. And then of course, follow other good habits like using dry shampoo when you can, staying out of the sun, etc.
Awesome. Thanks, Val. Okay, to me, I always love when we get to brainstorm as a team for new products, and this might be something to consider for the future.
Okay.
Somebody asked if we had thought of bringing in a red high lift to our permanent hair color. And I know that I've used red high lifts in my lifetime as a colorist, and they are awesome. So maybe that's something we add to the list.
Yeah, so I've actually worked on a red high lift in the past. I really liked it, but I'm just one aspect of product development. So for many reasons, a product comes to market or doesn't come to market. And we get suggestions all the time, like, oh, we should make this, oh, we should make that. But, the determining factors are not necessarily just like the cool factor. That's, part of it. It really is like a bigger machine. So I'll definitely repass that on to our sales team and marketing team. But yeah, I think they're really pretty, especially with the reds, because it's such a nice complement to the natural warmth that's in the hair. Just getting everyone else on board for that.
Yep, I agree. So one question I had, this is more of probably a stylist is asking, is what is the difference between an ombre and a balayage? And I love this question because as a trainer,
answer. Yeah.
What was that?
I would know the answer.
Well, I think it's been interesting.
Is one a technique and one's a look, or
exactly? And I think that the word ombre has now become interchangeable with being a technique, where ombre was always used in fashion to dye out fabrics. It's a gradation of tones, and ombre itself actually means shadow. And so it makes sense that we would have ombre hair, and have that end result look, where to me, balayage is more of a technique. And balayage actually means sweeping, which I thought was an interesting definition to that word. And it makes sense because it's actually how we're applying product, is sweeping motions on the surface of the hair to ultimately create an ombre. So I think anytime you see that gradation of tone, more of that shadow root, more of that rich base and multitude of tones, and it has that more just natural low maintenance vibe, then you can bet that would be more of a balayage technique to achieve an ombre look. So just something to think of. And also with foil work, this is the second part of this particular question, is what are some differences with foil work? And foil work, is so versatile too, where I like to use foils to do traditional highlights, and I still like to keep that business in the salon. I think there's definitely a place for foil work. It serves its purpose to this day. I actually have a technique that I enjoy doing in the salon for people who do want to have that low maintenance appearance, but they still want to have highlights a little bit closer to the base of the hair. So it's the balayage fake out. It was you were on with me, Val, when we did that technique. And I just do foil work around the crown and then do a root gloss with a demi-permanent, whether it's Crema XG or the Demi, and it gives sort of a shadow with a bit of reflection. So it's a really easy technique. You're incorporating that trend of a balayage and ombre end result, but you also get to do the technique work of traditional foil work. So it's kind of a nice go in between.
Oh, good. We actually have a question come in live.
Ooh.
Ready for it? Yeah. Becca asks, what are some hair trends you're seeing for 2021?
For 2021, I think COVID has been such an interesting year for hair. Everybody is letting it grow and be free with whether it's gray, whether it's their natural. So I'm seeing a lot of that outgrow of gray. We've been seeing that as a trend more early on in 2020, but now I think that was before even COVID came to town. And now that women are embracing their outgrow and they're not actually doing anything about it. They're looking for ways to maybe have that full grow out, blend it a bit more. And I think as hairdressers, and I know Colin talks about this all the time, is we can't be afraid to have our guests transition out of their natural color. We just need to adapt and show them new ways and introduce new tones. We can always add in more of that silver, that grayish, ashy tones that will help give that some depth and move it along a little bit better. You can always add in lowlights to give that salt and pepper look. So that's one thing that we're seeing a lot of. I'm actually working with one of my dear friends and clients right now, outgrowing her level 2 color with stark white outgrows. So that's been fun to kind of transition. Some other things that I'm seeing out there is, again, going with the natural vibe. Maybe some of our dependent blondes are moving into more of their natural color, or not being afraid to add in more dimension, adding in more tone. And I think people are just willing to play because they're starting to feel a little restless with not having a lot of ability to maybe have had their hair done for so many months. And when you're staying inside, you find anything that you can do to help your morale a little bit. So what about you, Val? Do you see anything?
I think warmer colors are going to come back. And that's just not because of what I've been working on in the lab. Several years ago, not several years ago, it was just a few years ago, I mentioned to somebody, I think warm tones are going to come back. And they laughed at me like I was insane. Like, no one's ever going to ask to be warmer. But I think it's coming back. I think people are going to want the caramels and the mochas and the really warm, natural looks that are just taking, what would be like your natural hair, like to the next level with that depth, dimension, shimmer, multifaceted look. So I think that's going to come back.
I agree. I think that ashes will always be a staple in a color cupboard of a hairdresser, but I definitely have been seeing a little bit more warmth come back into formulas. And quite frankly, I'm ready to try some things that are new. As a hairdresser, we want to try.
Yeah.
I know we have some nice new shades coming next year that I think will help add in some of those really beautiful beigey, pretty tones. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Great question, Becca. And if you guys have a question, you can type it in below and we'll answer your question live on air.
Yes, please. Okay, so as far as color lines that we have, or color brands, which would be considered maybe the most versatile?
What would be the most versatile? Well, I think what's nice about each color line is that like they're all created for a reason and for a specific user and for a specific level of formulation comfort. And in terms of versatility, I really like a couple things. One is Paul Mitchell, the color. It's our original color line with a natural beeswax base, super creamy. I personally like the really thick consistency of it. Some people don't, that's fine. That's why there's multiple color lines, something for everyone. But what I really like about it is you have a wide variety of shades, but we also preach that you can use different developers to create a different end look, right? So, you know, you can increase your developer for more brightness. You can decrease your developer to treat the color as a toner or a demi-permanent. So I really like that flexibility. I'm someone who, I don't like a lot of things. I like a few things and I like to use them in lots of ways. So for someone like me, that's perfect. And then I also like, I can't ever like not talk about the demi. I'm very sorry. I created it. It's my baby. But I really like the level 9s. I'll tell you why. One, you can get like a lot of bang for your buck out of it if you want a lot of tone, but then you can also dilute it with clear to use it as a quick toner or a more sheer result. And I like that.
I agree. I think I use both the Color and Color XG on, just depends on what I'm looking for or the particular guest that I'm working on. But I definitely see how I can, with the Color, be able to change my developer and do all the things that you mentioned. So it's nice to have that. And I too love the demi. I use it quite often. What is your favorite color by Paul Mitchell color? That's the question. That's a tough one because I feel like it's like if you have children, you don't have a favorite. You sort of love them for different reasons.
Love them for
So that's sort of how I feel. What was that?
you love them for different reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I will say that I probably use demi-permanent the most because I do so much blonding. And for that reason, I'll probably lean towards more of those demi-permanents because of that. I being double processed blondes or just foil work or even doing balayage techniques and using demis to do low lights with or any sort of root shadow. And even sometimes I blend gray with that highlight within the hair. So it's sort of like my go-to. I'd say probably like 90% of my clientele has a demi-permanent on their head. So with that, probably thinking in terms of opacity, Creme XG is going to have that true opacity where it's shade matched to Color XG. I know that if I'm looking for that heavier coverage, it's going to give me that, but still give me tons of condition and shine. And that hair feels so good after using it. And then with the demi, I have that more semi-opaque. I love doing any type of toning and especially adding in low lights with that. If I don't want super heavy coverage, I still want a little bit more reflection and dimension. And both don't shift the base of that natural color. So if I am refining, then that's awesome. But I do actually love our ultra toners from Color XG to do a base break. If I'm doing traditional foil work, soften that up. I only leave it on for like 5-10 minutes just to ensure that I'm softening, not lifting too much, or it gets a little, there's a fine line with that. But so those are my probably top 3 and reasons why I use them the most. So, but I do love them all.
Well, I'll give you my favorite families because I can appreciate all the color lines for every different level of stylist, every different purpose. In Paul Mitchell the Color, I really love the Chocolate Plus series for up to 100% gray coverage. It's very, very beautiful, natural looking results, very easy to use. If I were a hairstylist, I would just I would do single process. I would be like the worst hairstylist ever. But I feel like you could do that with the chocolates and still have something that looks really good. In
Definitely.
Color XG, I really love the Copper series just because it does look so natural, and we have like something even better coming up, and I'm not allowed to talk about it, that I love even more. But in like the everyone loves a beautiful flashy orange or red, right? But I would have to say I really love our new VG series and our BG series. And not just because VG is my initials, that's a total, I actually wanted to call it GV. But anyway, I just really, again, like that they're soft, they're natural, they work on like every skin tone. They're really great. And of course, I like warmer tones, so the BG series is a win for me. And then in the demi, I would have to say, I like the matte series. I know a lot of people don't use it. they're scared because it's green. I mean, it's greenish. If you go on my Instagram, you can see where I'm like holding the different swatches neat. But if you know how to use them in color correction, they create the most beautiful, natural colors on the planet. So stunning. And I'm always telling our marketing team and digital team, like, you need to do a matte series campaign, because once someone makes that leap and learns how to use it, like, they're obsessed with it.
Agreed. I love the matte series, and I agree. It's a little, people can tend to get a little nervous about green, but on the right level, it just is beautiful. It lifts beautifully if you're working with it in a lifting capability or
In
depositing.
Color XG, we have it as well. It's color matched. Yep.
I feel like it's like the perfect, it lifts to that J-Lo brown that doesn't have too much warmth. It's just perfect. One thing I forgot to tell you, Val, is, and this is for all of hairdressers out there too, I had a blonde that I refined, and I mixed the 9P and 9VG together, and it was amazing. I loved it.
Do you have a picture?
10 volume. You know what? I don't, because I get so busy in the salon. It's hard sometimes to take those photos, and I need to just be better at that. That needs to be a New Year's resolution for me.
It's super buttery and beautiful looking. Oh my!
It was amazing. It looked like the best glass of champagne you ever had, and it just was pretty, and it just kind of gave like that iridescent, but had nice reflection. No warmth, just nice. So try that out there.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So Val, our time is already up.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
But what do we have for them next time? I know next time on episode 4, it launches November 2nd. And we actually have a science experiment that we're doing in the lab.
Yeah, so we got into the lab a little bit, and we are talking about the difference between oxidative and direct dyes. And I really feel like that's something you have to visualize. We spend a lot of time talking on the show, and we have some graphics to show things, but this is best seen in the laboratory. So we did a little experiment to show people the difference between those two colors. One question I get a lot of is, well, how do you know it's direct? How do you know it's oxidative? This experiment will show you how.
I'm excited for that. And we may have an adjustment in our timing for the next Hair and Now, and have it on the afternoon of the 2nd. So stay tuned for that. We will let that information be known as soon as possible. But we look forward to seeing you next time. And as always, tune in and ask your color questions, or leave your comments under the chat in the YouTube. That way we can start to craft our shows to be viewer friendly. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Val.
Everyone, have a good day.